Are you completely out of your mind? The security guard's voice echoed to the pristine hallway of Westfield Academy as he gripped Marcus Thompson's arm. A convicted felon teaching children? Do you realize what kind of lawsuit this could bring? Marcus stood perfectly still, his weather hands clasped behind his back as 3 security officers surrounded him. At 38, he had learned that sudden movements only made situations worse. His gray maintenance uniform bore the Academy's logo, but the suspicious glares told him that wouldn't matter now. "Sir, I was just helping with homework during my lunch break," Marcus said calmly, though his heart pounded against his ribs. Behind him, through the classroom window, he could see Emma Richardson, the billionaire's daughter, watching with wide, frightened eyes. The head of security, Officer Walsh, stepped closer, his badge catching the fluorescent light. "Background checks don't lie, Thompson. 8 years in state prison for armed robbery. What kind of sick game are you playing here?" What they didn't know was that Marcus had spent those 8 years earning 2 bachelor's degrees through correspondence courses, devouring every book the prison library offered. Mathematics, literature, science, philosophy, subjects that had kept his sanity intact when concrete walls tried to crush his spirit. He graduated summa cum laude from both programs, achievements that meant nothing to a world that saw only his criminal record. 3 months ago, when he'd started working as a janitor at Westfield Academy, Marcus never intended to become involved with any student. The pay was decent, the work honest, and most importantly, nobody asked questions about his past as long as he emptied trash cans and mopped floors without causing trouble. But Emma Richardson was different. While other kids her age played on expensive tablets during lunch breaks, she sat alone in empty classrooms, struggling with basic algebra that should have been simple for a 7th grader. Marcus had noticed her frustrated tears during his daily cleaning rounds, the crumpled homework papers in her wastebasket, the way she'd stare at math problems like they were written in a foreign language. "The kid's struggling," Marcus had quietly mentioned to her teacher, Miss Carter, one afternoon after witnessing Emma break down over a failed quiz. "I noticed she's having trouble with fractions and basic equations." Miss Carter had laughed dismissively, not looking up from her designer coffee. "And you think a janitor knows better than our certified mathematics teachers with advanced degrees? She'll figure out, or her father will hire another expensive tutor." But Marcus had seen something in Emma's frustrated tears that reminded him of his younger sister, the one he'd failed to protect before his life spiraled into crime and incarceration. So he'd started leaving small notes beside her desk during his cleaning routine. Simple explanations written on scraps of paper. Different approaches to the same problems that somehow made the numbers make sense. The notes worked like magic. Emma's grades improved dramatically within weeks. She began staying after school, pretending to organize supplies while Marcus quietly showed her shortcuts and techniques that made algebra click in ways her expensive tutors never could. Their sessions became the highlight of both their days, a brilliant girl finally understanding her potential, and a forgotten man remembering what it felt like to make a positive difference. She went from failing to honor roll in 2 months, Marcus said to Officer Walsh, trying to keep his voice steady. "Ask her teachers. Check her test scores. I never did anything inappropriate. Doesn't matter what you did or didn't do." Walsh snapped back. "You're a convicted felon who lied on his employment application. You shouldn't be within 100 yards of children, period. Until today, when someone had spotted them working together and immediately called security. The anonymous tip claimed Marcus was grooming the Richardson girl, using her homework sessions to gain access to the school's wealthiest family. Mr. Richardson is flying in personally to handle the situation," Officer Walsh announced, checking his radio with obvious satisfaction. "A felon near his daughter? This school's reputation is on the line. You're done here, Thompson." Marcus felt his chest tighten as the weight of inevitability settled over him. Richard Richardson, tech mogul, worth billions, the kind of man who could destroy lives with a single phone call. The kind of man who would never understand that sometimes the most broken people carry the deepest wisdom, forged in the fires of consequence and redemption. As the security team debated whether to call police immediately or wait for Richardson's arrival, Marcus caught Emma's eye through the window. She pressed her small hand against the glass, tears streaming down her face, her lips moving in words he couldn't hear but understood perfectly. I'm sorry. In that moment, he made a silent promise. Whatever happened next, he wouldn't let her think this was her fault. She had done nothing wrong, except believe that people could be more than their worst mistakes. What none of them realized was that this apparent disaster would soon reveal secrets buried for 8 long years. Secrets about sacrifice, family loyalty, and the difference between justice and revenge. The custodian they were about to destroy had survived far worse than their judgment. And sometimes the most dangerous opponents are those with nothing left to lose. If this story of unexpected mentorship and hidden truths is touching your heart, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories that prove people aren't always what they seem. The black helicopter landed on Westfield Academy's pristine lawn exactly 47 minutes later, its rotors whipping perfectly manicured grass into a frenzy. Richard Richardson emerged in his signature Navy suit, flanked by 2 attorneys and his personal security detail. Students pressed their faces against classroom windows, watching the spectacle unfold like a scene from a movie. "Where is he?" Richardson's voice carried across the courtyard as he strode toward the main building, his Italian leather shoes clicking against the marble steps. At 52, the tech billionaire had built his empire on control and precision. The idea that a convicted criminal had been near his daughter for months made his blood boil with rage he hadn't felt since his early corporate battles. Inside the principal's office, Marcus sat quietly in an uncomfortable plastic chair, while Richardson paced like a caged predator. The contrast was stark. Richardson's $5,000 suit against Marcus's faded maintenance uniform. Power versus powerlessness. Privilege versus punishment. 8 years for armed robbery. Richardson read from his tablet, his voice dripping with disgust and barely contained fury. Violence, theft, complete disregard for society's rules. And you people let him around children? Around him, why, child? Principal Hayes shifted uncomfortably behind his desk, sweat beading on his forehead. "Mr. Richardson, we followed all legal protocols. Background checks were completed, but his work performance has been exemplary for 3 months. No incidents, no complaints." Exemplary? Richardson's laugh was sharp and cold, echoing off the office walls. The man held a gun to an innocent person's face, terrorized a store clerk for drug money. And you're telling me about work performance? What Richardson didn't know, what nobody knew except Marcus and one other person, was that Marcus had never held that gun. His younger brother Derek had been the one robbing the convenience store that night 8 years ago. Marcus had only been in the car outside, waiting, completely unaware of Derek's desperate plan, until he heard the screaming from inside the store. When police sirens wailed in the distance, Derek had already fled through the back door, leaving Marcus to face the charges alone. The evidence was circumstantial but damning. Marcus's fingerprints on the car, his presence at the scene, and Derek's complete disappearance. The public defender had been overworked and underpaid, pushing for a quick plea deal rather than fighting for the truth. Marcus had refused to testify against his own brother, even when the prosecutor promised a reduced sentence in exchange for Derek's location. Family protects family, he'd told himself during those long nights in county jail, choosing 8 years in prison over destroying Derek's future. Derek had used that time to turn his life around, becoming a social worker helping at-risk youth. He never knew the sacrifice Marcus had made, never knew his brother was serving time for his crime. "I want him arrested immediately for child endangerment," Richardson demanded, pointing at Marcus like he was something diseased. "I want restraining orders filed. I want him banned from every school in the state. Hell, make it the entire country." One of Richardson's attorneys whispered something in his ear, making him smile with cruel satisfaction. "And I want a full investigation into the school's hiring practices. Heads will roll for this negligence." That's when Emma burst through the office door, her school uniform wrinkled, her face streaked with tears and flushed with determination. The security guard tried to stop her, but she pushed past him with surprising strength. "Dad, stop. You don't understand what you're doing," she cried, her voice cracking with emotion. "Emma, go wait in the car this instant," Richardson commanded, his tone sharp enough to cut glass. But his daughter stood firm, planting her feet, like she learned to do when facing down schoolyard bullies. "Mr. Marcus taught me more in 3 months than I learned an entire previous year," she said, her voice trembling but growing stronger with each word. He made math make sense for the first time in my life. He helped me write better essays. He listened when no one else did, not even you. Richardson's face softened momentarily at his daughter's tears, but hardened again when his eyes fell on Marcus. He manipulated you, sweetheart. Criminals are experts at that. They identify vulnerable targets and exploit their trust. Emma shook her head violently, her ponytail whipping from side to side. He never asked for anything. He never made me uncomfortable. He never even asked about you or our family. He just cared about whether I understood fractions. The room fell silent, except for Emma's quiet sobs and the distant sound of helicopters cooling rotors. Marcus watched his 13-year-old girl, the daughter of one of America's most powerful men, defending him with more courage than most adults possessed. His chest ached with an emotion he hadn't felt since his own sister's death years ago. "You have exactly 10 minutes to gather your things," Richardson told Marcus coldly, checking his Rolex with theatrical precision. "After that, if I see you within a mile of my daughter or this school, I'll have you back in prison so fast your head will spin." Richardson's phone buzzed with what Marcus assumed were messages from the Billionaire's public relations team, already working to spin this story before it could damage the family's reputation. "And don't even think about talking to the media," Richardson added with a smug smile. "I own more journalists than you can count." As Marcus stood to leave, he noticed something that Richardson had missed in his righteous fury. Emma's algebra textbook lay open on the principal's desk, filled with perfect solutions to problems she'd struggled with for months, all written in her own handwriting, but using techniques and shortcuts no Westfield teacher had ever shown her. But what Richardson truly didn't understand was that Marcus's real crime hadn't been a robbery 8 years ago. It was a secret so devastating that it had driven him to protect Derek at any cost, a secret involving their younger sister's death that would soon surface and change everything Richardson thought he knew about justice, loyalty, and the price of family bonds. Every word of rejection, every sneer of disgust, only strengthened something quietly burning inside Marcus. Not anger, but determination that men like Richardson couldn't recognize, because they'd never had to fight for the right to be seen as human rather than just another statistic in the criminal justice system. The billionaire had no idea that he just declared war on someone who had already survived the worst that society could offer, someone who understood that true power came not from money or connections, but from the quiet strength of knowing you'd sacrificed everything for the people you loved. 2 weeks after his expulsion from Westfield Academy, Marcus sat in the downtown public library, surrounded by law books, laptop computers that seemed older than his prison sentence, and stacks of printed documents that told a story Richardson never wanted exposed. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as he worked methodically through corporate filings, his notebook filled with dates, names, and connections that painted a disturbing picture. The librarian, Mrs. Chun, had become his unlikely ally after learning about his situation through Emma's desperate online posts searching for her teacher, Mr. Marcus. A retired investigative journalist herself, Mrs. Chun recognized the signs of a man on a mission for justice rather than revenge. "Richardson's people called here again yesterday," Mrs. Chun whispered, sliding another legal precedent across the scarred wooden table. "Wanted to know if you've been researching anything suspicious, especially anything related to their family or business interests. I told them you've been studying educational law and civil rights cases." She smiled grimly, adjusting her reading glasses, which is technically true, just not the whole truth. What Mrs. Chin didn't mention to Richardson's investigators was that Marcus had also been deep diving into corporate records, tax filings, employment practices, and charity foundations connected to Richardson's business empire. His 8 years in prison had taught him patience and how to research methodically, skills that proved invaluable when navigating legal databases and public records that most people never bothered to examine. Marcus had discovered something fascinating buried in Richardson Tech's employment records. While the company's official policy stated zero tolerance for criminal backgrounds, the executive roster told a different story entirely. Richardson's nephew, James Richardson, held a senior vice president position despite a 2018 felony conviction for embezzling $2.3 million from a children's cancer research charity. "Family gets second chances," Marcus muttered, printing out the documents that showed James's conviction, sentencing, and somehow his employment at Richardson Tech just 18 months later. Everyone else gets permanent punishment. The pattern extended beyond family members. Richardson Tech employed at least 6 other executives and board members with various white-collar convictions: tax evasion, securities fraud, environmental violations. All of them wealthy, all of them connected, all of them given opportunities that someone like Marcus could never dream of accessing. Meanwhile, Richardson's arrogance grew daily. At a charity gala that weekend, captured on video by local news crews, he bragged openly to fellow billionaires about cleaning house at his daughter's school. "You can't be too careful these days," he said, swirling his champagne while cameras rolled. "These criminal elements think they can infiltrate our institutions, corrupt our children with their presence." I shut that down fast. What Richardson didn't realize was that Emma had been recording their private conversations at home, using her phone to document his increasingly cruel comments about people like Marcus who belong behind bars where they can't contaminate decent society. Her young mind was beginning to understand that her father's wealth had blinded him to basic human decency and the possibility of redemption. "He says terrible things about you when his friends come over," Emma typed during one of their encrypted messaging sessions. "He calls you that criminal and says you probably plan to kidnap me or something crazy like that. I tried to tell him about my grades, but he just bought me a new laptop instead of listening." The breakthrough came when Marcus discovered something that made his hands shake as he held the printed pages. Richardson's charitable foundation, which claimed to support second chance programs for disadvantaged youth, had never actually funded a single program for anyone with a criminal background. Instead, the money went to elite boarding schools, private tutoring for wealthy families, and scholarship programs that explicitly excluded anyone with so much as a misdemeanor conviction. "The hypocrisy is stunning," Mrs. Chin observed, reading over Marcus's shoulder the financial documents spread across 3 tables. "He's literally profiting off the idea of helping people like you while ensuring people like you never get help." Marcus had also been tracking Richardson's social media presence and public statements, building a timeline of contradictions that revealed a man who preached about redemption in public while practicing discrimination in private. The billionaire's Twitter account was filled with inspirational quotes about second chances and human potential, posted the same days he was having his legal team ensure Marcus could never work around children again. Emma found ways to maintain contact through encrypted messaging apps, updating Marcus on her declining grades and growing depression. Her new tutors, expensive PhDs with impressive credentials hired by her father, couldn't connect with her the way Marcus had. They treated her like a problem to be solved rather than a person to be understood. "Dad says I'm being dramatic about missing you," she typed during one late-night conversation, her words appearing on Marcus's library computer screen. "He bought me a new car to make up for losing my friend, like things can replace people. I told him the car won't help me understand algebra, and he said I need to stop being so attached to inappropriate relationships." That night, sitting alone in the library after closing time, Mrs. Chin had given him a key. Marcus made his decision. He wouldn't just prove his innocence or fight for his job back. He would expose the hypocrisy of a system that gave second chances based on wealth and connections rather than genuine change, growth, and the content of someone's character. Mrs. Chin noticed a shift in his research patterns the next morning. "You're not just defending yourself anymore," she observed as he requested files on media contacts, investigative journalists, and public records laws. "You're going on the offensive." Marcus looked up from his laptop, where he'd been carefully documenting everything: Richardson's discriminatory hiring practices, his nephew's special treatment, Emma's educational regression, audio recordings of Richardson's public statement about criminal elements, and financial records showing the Foundation's fraudulent mission. His notebook contained names, dates, and a strategy that would use Richardson's own words and actions against him. "Sometimes the best offense is showing people who the real criminal is," Marcus said quietly, his voice carrying a certainty that hadn't been there weeks earlier. But what Mrs. Chin couldn't see was a deeper strategy forming in Marcus's mind, a plan that would use Richardson's own pride, prejudice, and public statements against him, revealing truths that would shake the very foundations of everything Richardson believed about justice, worth, and the power of redemption. He'd also been in contact with Derek, his brother, through carefully worded emails that danced around the truth they'd both been living with for 8 years. Derek had sensed something was building and offered to help in any way possible. though he still didn't know the full extent of Marcus's sacrifice. The man who had survived 8 years behind bars for a crime he didn't commit was about to teach a billionaire that the most dangerous opponent is the one you underestimate completely, especially when that person has nothing left to lose and everything to prove about the true meaning of justice and second chances. The press conference was scheduled for 3 p.m. at the downtown community center, but Richardson only learned about it when his assistant burst into his office at 2:47 p.m., her face pale with panic and her hands trembling as she held out her tablet. "Sir, you need to see this immediately," she stammered, thrusting the device toward him. The screen showed a live stream titled "The Truth About Second Chances: When Billionaires Choose Who Deserves Redemption." The viewer count was climbing rapidly. 15,000, 25,000, 50,000 people watching in real time. Richardson's blood turned to ice as he watched Marcus Thompson, cleaned up in a borrowed charcoal suit that made him look nothing like the janitor he'd dismissed, sitting calmly beside investigative journalist Sarah Martinez. Behind them, a large screen displayed Richardson Tech's employment records in stark black and white, highlighting his nephew's executive position despite a felony embezzlement conviction that had stolen money from children with cancer. "This can't be happening," Richardson muttered, frantically dialing his legal team while his public relations department erupted in chaos around him. But it was too late. The story was already spreading across social media faster than his lawyers could respond, faster than his PR team could spin, faster than his money could contain. On screen, Marcus spoke with quiet dignity that commanded attention. 8 years ago, I made the choice to protect my younger brother Derek by accepting responsibility for his crime. I never held that gun, never threatened anyone, never even knew what Derek planned until I heard the screaming from inside that convenience store. His voice remained steady, controlled, as he continued. I could have testified against him, could have reduced my sentence, but I couldn't watch my brother destroy his future for one desperate mistake. The revelation hit Richardson like a physical blow. Everything he believed about Marcus, every assumption he'd made, every cruel word he'd spoken, it all crumbled in that moment as the truth rewrote the narrative he'd built in his mind. But Marcus wasn't finished. With methodical precision that spoke of weeks of careful planning, he presented a timeline of Richardson's hypocrisy. Audio recordings that Emma had secretly made played through the speakers. Richardson's voice clearly stating that people like that ex-con should be permanently barred from decent society, while simultaneously bragging at dinner parties about giving his nephew a fresh start after his little legal trouble. Mr. Richardson believes second chances should depend on your bank account and family connections, Marcus said, looking directly into the camera with eyes that held no anger, only steady determination. His nephew embezzled $2.3 million from a children's charity, money meant to fund cancer research, and received a corner office 18 months later. I protected my brother from his own mistakes and received a lifetime ban from contributing to society. Richardson's phone exploded with calls from board members, investors, and crisis management firms. His hands shook as he watched the live stream counter climb past 200,000 viewers, then 300,000, while his assistant fielded frantic calls from news outlets requesting comment. The most devastating moment came when Emma appeared on screen via video call from her aunt's house, where she'd been staying since the confrontation at school. Her young voice was clear and determined, carrying the moral authority that only comes from witnessing injustice firsthand. "My father taught me that actions have consequences, but he forgot that prejudice has consequences too," Emma said, her words cutting to the static of the video call. "Mr. Marcus showed me more kindness and patience in 3 months than some people show in a lifetime. He never asked for anything except that I try my best." As she spoke, the screen split to display Emma's dramatically improved test scores during her time learning from Marcus, F's and D's transforming into A's and B's, contrasted with her recent decline under expensive private tutors. "Dad always says he values results over everything else," Emma continued, "but he fired the only teacher who actually got results because he couldn't see past his own prejudices." Richardson watched in horror as his carefully constructed public image crumbled in real time. Social media erupted with hashtag #SecondChanceHypocrisy, trending worldwide within minutes. Major news outlets picked up the story as their phones began ringing. His company's stock price began plummeting as investors questioned his judgment, his values, and his fitness to lead a publicly traded corporation. But the final crushing blow came when Derek Thompson, now 29, and a respected social worker with commendations from 3 different youth organizations, appeared on screen via video call from his office in Chicago. His face crumpled as he learned the truth for the first time, tears streaming down his cheeks as 8 years of lies and sacrifice suddenly made terrible sense. Marcus, Derek's voice cracked with emotion that reached through the screen. 8 years of your life for me? All this time I thought you made your own mistakes, followed your own path. I never knew. God, I could have testified. I could have come forward. I could have... You were 21 years old with your whole life ahead of you, Marcus interrupted gently, his own voice thick with emotion he'd held back for nearly a decade. You were struggling with addiction, making desperate choices, but you were still my little brother. That's what big brothers do. We protect the people we love, even when it costs us everything. Derek held up a framed photo of their sister Sarah, who had died in a car accident a year before the robbery. The tragedy that sent Derek spiraling into drugs and desperation. She would have been so proud of what you did, Derek whispered, and so ashamed of what I let you sacrifice. Richardson slammed his laptop shut, but the damage was irreversible and spreading like wildfire across every platform, every network, every conversation in corporate America. His phone buzzed with emergency board meeting notifications and resignation demands from investors who couldn't afford to be associated with the scandal. His charitable foundation's donors were pulling funding. His wife was fielding calls from reporters at their private estate. The man who had once boasted about owning journalists now watched helplessly as those same journalists picked apart his life, his business practices, and his character. The billionaire who had spent his life believing that money determined worth was about to learn that sometimes the richest people are those who sacrifice everything for others, and that true justice doesn't require wealth, only truth, courage, and the patience to let arrogance destroy itself. Within hours, hashtag Marcus Thompson was trending alongside hashtag Second Chances and hashtag Justice for Janitors. The story had touched a nerve in a society tired of watching wealthy criminals receive different treatment than poor ones, tired of watching privileged trump redemption, tired of watching good people punished while bad people with money walked free. The community center where the press conference was held became a gathering place for supporters, people sharing their own stories of second chances denied and justice delayed. Richardson's empire, built on the belief that power could control narrative, was crumbling under the weight of simple truth spoken with dignity and backed by undeniable evidence. The reckoning Richardson had never expected was finally here, delivered not by an angry criminal seeking revenge, but by a patient man seeking justice. And the difference between those two motivations was about to cost Richardson everything he'd spent his life building. 6 months later, Marcus Thompson stood in the elegant lobby of the newly opened Second Chance Learning Center, watching as students from all backgrounds work together on projects that traditional schools had declared impossible. The nonprofit center, funded by an anonymous donor who turned out to be Emma Richardson, had become a nationwide model for alternative education. Marcus served as its director, his unconventional teaching methods now studied by education professionals across the country. The irony is beautiful, said Dr. Patricia Williams, the former Westfield principal who had joined Marcus's team after resigning in protest of the school board's discriminatory policies. The man Richardson tried to destroy created something more valuable than Richardson's entire educational foundation. Richardson's fall had been swift and comprehensive. The board of directors voted him out within 2 weeks of the press conference. Richardson Tech stock never recovered from the scandal. His charitable foundation lost its nonprofit status after investigations revealed nepotistic hiring practices. Most devastating of all, Emma chose to live with her aunt rather than the father who had taught her that worth was measured by wealth rather than character. Dad became everything he claimed to hate, Emma told reporters 6 months after the scandal broke. Someone who used power to hurt innocent people. Derek Thompson had quit his social work position to join his brother's center, finally able to work alongside the man who had sacrificed 8 years for his freedom. Their reunion had been painful but healing. 2 brothers rebuilding a relationship founded on truth rather than secrets. The center's waiting list stretched for miles. Parents who once would have scorned Marcus's background now fought to enroll their children in programs designed by someone who understood that wisdom often comes from the most unexpected places. Marcus's office walls displayed thank you letters from former students, many of whom had struggled in traditional settings but flourished under his guidance. Among them was a framed photo of Emma at her high school graduation, valedictorian despite her father's predictions that association with Marcus would ruin her future. Richardson, meanwhile, had retreated to a modest apartment in another state, his billions reduced to millions by lawsuits and failed investments. His former friends avoided him at charity galas. His business contacts stopped returning calls. The man who had once decided who deserved second chances found himself desperately needing one, with no one willing to provide it. He created his own prison, Missichin observed during one of her regular visits to the center. The difference is Marcus used his time behind bars to grow. Richardson used his freedom to become smaller. The center's motto, carved into marble above the entrance, read, "Excellence has no prerequisites except character and effort." It served as a daily reminder that true education happened when someone saw potential where others saw problems. Emma visited every weekend, her relationship with Marcus stronger than ever. She had grown into a confident young woman who judged people by their actions rather than their backgrounds, carrying forward lessons her father never intended to teach. On quiet evenings, Marcus would walk through the center's empty halls, remembering the janitor's closet where he'd first helped a struggling billionaire's daughter with fractions. That small act of kindness had cascaded into something neither of them could have imagined, proof that sometimes the most broken people carry the greatest capacity for healing others. Richardson had tried to destroy Marcus, but ended up destroying only himself. Marcus learned that the truest revenge isn't inflicting damage on your enemies. It's building something so meaningful that their hatred becomes irrelevant, their judgment powerless, and their legacy forgotten, while yours transforms lives forever. If this story touched your heart and reminded you that second chances can create first-class futures, subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories that prove the best way to overcome those who doubt you is to become everything they said you couldn't be.